Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another edition of My Faith with Homer and Pip. Homer?
I usually start with Mother Teresa. And I do this time, but also because I had a T-shirt where it says on the back, "My secret is a very simple one. I pray, Mother Teresa." And people inevitably come up and say, "I love the T-shirt." No one has ever objected, not one person. And so I like it better on the back because they see it as you're walking away, so you're not trying to force anything on them, though. I should probably put it on the front or the back. So it hasn't changed. Mother Teresa, remember this. She said it when they asked her. It's a short speech. What's so
Mhm.
special? My secret is a very simple one. I pray. That was it. They wanted more. She said, there is no more. That's it.
She's a
Tommy?
big goodness of God, right? And I experienced that at Walmart yesterday. I went in complaining to myself about something. And then the good Lord put Annie and Kim in front of me, two special needs people who were greeters. And I said, God, thanks a lot. We had a wonderful conversation. And speaking of the goodness of God, it definitely is in the heart and the soul of our guest today on My Faith with Homer and Pip. Her name is Karen Ellenberger. Forgive me, Karen Ellenbecker, and she is the founder of the Ellenbecker Investment Group. She's a lot more. She's a mom, she's a grandma, she's even a great grandma. Look at her. Can you believe that, Homer? Can you believe that? But what she truly is defined by is being a woman of faith. Thanks again, Karen, for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. We've got so much history, especially Steve and I, being on the radio show for all those years together. And I have to say, who would have ever thought that I would be sitting here on My Faith talking to the two of you? And Tom, you were so supportive of our stand up and play in so many different ways. And so this has just been a true gift. And it shows you how God does things in our lives and we don't know why. And then we make this full circle and here we are together. It's fabulous.
Truly is. All right, Homer, kick us off, buddy.
Well, as stated, there is some background here, but that really doesn't make any difference because my question is the same either way. I don't know what it is. I don't know all of it, but I know this. I want to know how it started. So, Karen, my faith, how do you wish to start your story?
You know, Homer, I just want to lay a little foundation that, so I grew up Catholic and I went to Catholic schools all the way through eighth grade. And I never owned a Bible. Um, the priest had the Bible. We weren't taught that. And my memories of going to Catholic school were a young man passed away, fell on the ice when I was in second grade. And I remember that. And I remember that Sister Coronata, I remember so few names, but boy, do I remember her name. And she used to have a ruler in those black arms that they had. And I always wondered what were in those sleeves. And I always wondered, did they have hair? You know, I also remember Sister Coronata hitting me on the shoulder with her ruler in church and saying, don't sing, just mouth it, because I couldn't sing very well. And the last thing she said to me was, Karen, you have great big brown cow eyes. And so my memories of Catholic education are probably a lot different than many, especially when we're talking about our faith. And when I look back and I think about 1991, I was not looking for God at all. When I left parochial school and went to public school, my parents never really encouraged us about spirituality or religion. It sort of dropped out once we left the Catholic grade school. And my sister started going to my brother to public school. But in 1991, my life was turned upside down. And there were so many things happening from us from my emotional point of view, my job, my children. And I had a friend of mine who said to me, you know, Karen, why don't you go to the Jesuit Retreat Center? I had just been there and I was to a silent retreat and it was absolutely wonderful. And I thought to myself, a silent retreat? I mean, talking is what I do. The idea of being silent was actually very scary to me because at that time, my son was in jail and my children were acting out, my son and my daughter. And being silent was really scary. The only way to get rid of some of those thoughts was to be noisy and to be around a lot of activity. But I happened to tell my parents about it. And my mother said, "Oh, it's for church. I'll babysit for the kids." And I thought, okay, I'm going to go to this thing. I've got a babysitter. I have a free weekend. And so I'm driving up to Lake Winnebago, and I'm thinking, I really wouldn't have to go to this thing. I could go to Appleton and go to a hotel. And in the introduction, they said no smoking, no alcohol. And of course, I didn't smoke, but I went to the um, liquor store and bought these little bottles of white wine, and I put them in my shoe, and I put the socks behind them, just to tell you how naive I was. I thought maybe these nuns would be going through my clothes to check me. And so I'm driving all the way there, and I get close where it says the exit, and I think, I am just going to go left, and I'm going to go and get a hotel room, and I'm going to veg out for the weekend. And literally, the car steering wheel turned to the right. And I got off and I thought, well, I could go around. And I thought, I'm just going to go. And so I got there. And when we checked in, we were at the dinner. There were 8 of us around this big table. And I looked at the people there. And I have to admit that I judged them like crazy. I looked at those women and I said, one is fat, one is skinny, one is rich, one is young. And they all had somber looks on their faces. And I just, I didn't want to be there. As I said, I wasn't looking for God. I didn't even know to look for God. And I was like a fish out of water. But I have to say, after this weekend with these women, I saw something that I never saw before. I saw so much emotion on their faces, and I actually felt as if we were connected in some way. It was such a beautiful thing. And um, on the last day, one of the women came up to me and she said, "Would you like to go outside? Because we could talk if we were outside." And she was really trying to encourage me to join Three Holy Women downtown, because many of the women had been going for years and years. And I listened. And as we walked back into the building, she said, "Have you met with any of the pastors, the priests?" And they were Jesuits. And there was one in particular, Father Richard, who every night would sing songs with his guitar. And he had this mellow, beautiful voice. And I wasn't used to being around nuns and priests that weren't dressed in their habits and in their garb. He was in a flannel shirt. He was just like a normal guy. And we're walking in this door, and the first 2 doors were busy. And she said, "Have you thought about it?" And I said, "No, I'll do it when I come next year." And so we get to Father Richard's door, and she looks and she said, "There's no one signed up here." She opens the door, walks in, and says, "Father Dick, this is Karen. Do you have time to talk to her?" And I'm like, "Really?" And so she walks out, shuts the door, and I sit down, and he says, "How you doing?" And I just unloaded. I mean, all of these things that have been happening. I had tears in my eyes, and he just was so quiet. And then he said, "Do you have a POTS?" And I thought I was being funny. And I said, "No." I said, "My son's in jail for pot. No, I don't have pot." And he said, "Karen, I mean pretty pots, like a pretty pot." And I said, "Well, I have one on my fireplace." And he said, "Does it have a cover?" And I said, "Well, it's got plumes in it." And he said, "Well, take out the plumes and create a cover. And what do you see?" And I said, "This pretty pot." And he said, "Now," he said, "put a crack in that pot for everything that you've told me and all the things that have been hard in your life." And he said, "How do you see God?" And I said, "As a white light." And he said, "Put that white light in the pot, and what do you see?" And I said, "The light coming through the cracks." And he said, "Karen, God has chosen you. You're special to be a crackpot for him to teach." He said, "You've been given a great gift." And my mind was so full of confusion. And I just looked at him like I didn't quite get it. And he said, and I said, I said, "We're going home today, and I don't want to go home. My life is so crazy and it's so noisy." And he said, "Why don't you go downstairs and go down to Mother Mary's chapel and just calm yourself down and before you go home?" And I walked out the door and I thought, "Oh, I'm just gonna go home." And then again, that message to go down there. So I walk down and it's downstairs and I open the door and there's a woman in there wailing and sobbing, just like you see in the movies. And I opened up the door with the light and it frightened me. And so I stood behind in the back of the room, just with my back against the wall. And I waited and she got up and she left and I don't ever think she saw me. And I went down and I sat and I kneeled on the railing there and I looked and it was Mary was there and there were a few candles and I just sat there and I said, I don't want to go home. I just don't want to go home. And a voice came to me that I thought was Mary. And she said, Karen, John is going to struggle for a very long time, but he'll be okay. Jeff is going to struggle, not as hard. And Julie will be your friend forever. She will always be there for you. And she will be your business partner. And you are going to be financially okay. And I looked around and I thought, is me wanting something so badly that I made it up? But it was so clear and it was such a beautiful voice. And it was so important because that whole week we had spent that weekend right before Mother's Day talking about how Mary had walked alongside Jesus and supported him in the decision he had made. And I'd been praying all week to have the courage to support my son, whatever it took him being in jail and then ultimately in prison. And again, though, my life was so crazy. I just got up and I left and I thought about it. I didn't really tell many people about it. Started doing life just the way it was. And ultimately, down the road, I started to think about God. And I joined the Course of Miracles to learn more about it, to learn more about the Bible. And I joined a parish and I became on that board. And our pastor was leaving. And so the board decided that every one of us on the board was going to give a sermon. And I was like, okay. And so I was out about 6 months, 7 months, and I thought for sure we'll have a pastor by then. And they called and said, what will you be speaking on? And I thought, I can't speak on investments. And I woke up in the middle of that night and God said to me, tell your crackpot story. And so at church, I told the crackpot story. And I had so many people come up to me and say, I have a son named John, and he has the same thing. And several people contacted me and asked me if I would speak in some churches in the inner city. And I did. And from that one opportunity that I spoke, another person came up to me and said, would you go to the women's prison in Waco, Texas? We're going there and we have so many people that want to participate in our service, but we need one person for every 3 people that are coming, and we really need people to come. And I said, no, I'm not interested in doing that at all, because I had nightmares and thinking about my son in jail and in prison and what that would be like. And I would go visit my son, and it was humiliating and it was awful to go there and be searched before you could go visit. And so I really had no interest in doing it at all. And I was telling my girlfriend about it, and she said, they've got great shopping there. I'll go with you if you want to go. And I said, okay. So I told the woman that I would go. I said, I don't even own a Bible. And she said, we got Bibles. So we went there. And on the first morning, they do testimonies, they do absolutely gorgeous music, and they talk about Bible verses. And so that Friday afternoon was wonderful. Saturday morning, we do the same thing over again. Other people came in and gave testimonies, lots of music. We leave for lunch. We come back from lunch and they're setting up again and the music doesn't work. And the woman says over the speaker, Karen, would you come up and tell your story? And I was in a panic and I said, what story? And she said, you know, the one you told in church, the crackpot story. So I got up there and I was so frightened. And it goes back to, what do I have to say that anybody else might want to know? And I walked up there and without even thinking or looking, I just told the story really fast. And I'm walking away from the podium and I'm walking to exit the stage and my feet freeze to the ground and I can't move. And I hear this voice that says, as clear as can be, tell the truth. And so I stopped and took a breath, and I turned around to the woman and I said, can I say one more thing? And she said, sure. And I walked up there. I had no idea what I was going to say, but I opened my eyes and I looked at the women there, and they were beautiful. They were all dressed in white. Their nails were done. Their hair was done. They had dresses or white pants on. There were other Bible people there, but I saw the women and they were looking at me. And I realized that they were just like me. They were in prison and I was in prison. And out of my mouth came, I want to tell you the truth. My son is in prison. Their mother, I'm raising my two grandchildren. Their father's in prison. Their mother is a drug addict on the street. And every night when they go to bed, they cry and they ask for their mother. They don't ask for their father, who is my son. They ask for their mother. And I said, they so badly want to know that she's okay. They want to know, that she loves them. And I said, please stay in contact with your children. They love you. You don't have to tell them where you are. You can tell them how you feel and how much you love them. And that was the end. And I walked off the podium, and when we were done with that particular service, the warden came up to me, and it happened to be a woman. And she said, I will never forget what you said. And I give you my word that I will do everything that I can to keep these parents and these mothers in touch with their children. And it was such, again, an incredible experience. But once again, I left and I didn't think much about it. And when I look back, my first granddaughter, Taylor, was born in 1996, and that's the exact same year that I started Ellenbecker Investment Group. And Taylor was 3 and Autumn was 2, and I went to get guardianship for them. And so I raised them from the time they were 2 and 3 until they were into high school. And when Taylor was 7, she came home and carrying this piece of paper, and she said, Nana, I want to be a brownie. And I said, okay. And I'm thinking, add one more thing to my plate, right? And I go to the meeting of the parents, and of course I'm leaving work and I've got a suit on and I'm in my 50s. And I ring the doorbell, and the woman comes to the door and she looks at me with this odd look and she goes, may I help you, ma'am? And I said, I'm here for Taylor Ellenbecker. She wants to be a brownie. And she said, oh, come on in. And shortly after that experience, all the kids in the school in her grade started to realize that they didn't have a mom and a dad. And Taylor was teased unmercifully and bullied. And Taylor always was a very anxious child. Autumn, it didn't seem to affect too much, but Taylor started sucking her thumb, and she sucked it down to the bone. And she started having night terrors and wetting the bed. And I really didn't know what to do about it. And it just so happened that every night, what we did before we went to bed was we would come home and they'd play outside or whatever, and then we'd have dinner, and then we would watch a Disney movie. Remember the black cassettes that you popped into the TV? And that night we watched the Aladdin. And what I would do then is they would say, brush their teeth, say their prayers, and go to bed. So the next day I happened to be in Kohl's department store, and they had bed linen that looked like this, sheets and pillowcases. And I bought them. And the next day when the girls came home from school, I said, I have a surprise for you. And we put the sheets on their bed. And then I looked at them and I said, but the real surprise is that I have bought you a magic pillow. And you can put this pillow on your bed, and then you can close your eyes and you can go find your mom and your dad anywhere in this world. This pillow is magic. And so I remember putting the pillowcase on, and Taylor says to me, "But Nana, where would my mom be?" And I said, "Well, she could be under an apple tree. She could be anywhere. But it's magic. You can find her." I would have to say within a month, the wedding almost stopped. She stopped gnawing her thumb, she never had another night terror. And I was just like, nailed it, got that one down. Didn't again think of any of this. I mean, I look back now and I think, how could I not have been thinking of any of this? And fast forward now, Taylor is in Minneapolis. I was feeling somewhat disconnected from her. And I asked her to come home for, she was about 19, 20. And I said, "Taylor, why don't you come home for Thanksgiving?" And so she did. She drove down and we had a big Thanksgiving celebration. She left for home and I went downstairs and I found her pillow and her pillowcase. And I called her on the phone and I said, "Taylor, you left your pillow here." And she said, "Nana, what will I do? I've never not slept with it." And I didn't know what to do. And I fretted all night and I woke up in the morning and God's voice came to me again and said, "Every child, every person who has been separated from someone that they love needs to have a pillowcase like that." And I called my one friend and told him what happened. He's the only person that I thought I could tell that God was talking to me and he wouldn't think I was nuts. And he said, "Go for it. You feel it, go for it." So I found the fabric, um, where I could get the pillowcases made. And it was like, what do I do with them? I mean, how do I market this or sell this? And then God came to me and said, "Write a book." And it was like, write a book. I never even went to college. I mean, seriously, write a book. And I called Taylor and I said, "Would you write a book with me?" And she said, "No, I don't know how to write a book." And I said, "Well, I have a friend, Christelle. I'll ask her to help us, but would you do it?" And she said, "Yeah, I'll help." And so we ended up writing a book. And it's My Pillow Has Wings, a true story of love, loss, and forgiveness. And then I looked at it and I had it published by Christian Faith Publishing. And they require you to, I think it was buy 250 books when you published. And so I bought them and I gave them away free to everybody. I mean, I just gave them away. And what happened was people started coming back to me and saying, "Do you know what you have here? You have an empathy program." Um, and Willie Porter, if you know Willie, he wrote a song about pillows with wings because his niece was being raised by his mom. And everybody just said, "You have this most beautiful package." And so I ended up hiring another company, and they worked with a psychologist, and we developed a workbook, 10 lessons to understanding big feelings. And I still didn't know what to do with it. And it happened to be introduced to Greater Holy Temple, Ed DeShazier, out by Northridge. And I went to him with the program and said, "Would you pilot this and give me feedback?" And he said, and I said, "I'll pay for everything." And he said, "I would love to do the program." And I said, "I need three things. I need feedback from you, the teachers, and the parents." And he said, "Karen, I will give you feedback. I know the teachers will, but we'll never get our parents to give you feedback. We're lucky if we get 25% of our parents to come to teacher conferences." He said, "Parent engagement is almost impossible, not in only our school, but all schools." And it was at the exact same time that Ian hit and destroyed Fort Myers. And my daughter and my son-in-law went down to Fort Myers and we wanted to volunteer. I have a small little condo there and so does she. And we ended up at a restaurant that opened up their restaurant to a community kitchen where people could eat there for free. And we volunteered. And one day after we were done, the owner of the restaurant said, "You want to get a cup of coffee?" And we said, "Sure." We left the restaurant and he looked at me and he said, "So what do you do for real life?" I mean, and I said, "Well, I said, I'm trying to retire. My daughter is the president of the company. And I said, I'm trying to get this nonprofit started, which is called Pillows with Wings, but I can't get anywhere because I can't get any feedback from parents. And he said, well, after the pandemic, he said, we had the same problem in one of our schools. And he said, I took over 500 burritos. And he said, the parents came like crazy for these burritos. They did teachers' conferences, and then they got their burritos and they could take them home. And so again, went home and thinking about it, and God came to me and said, you can do this. And so I went to Ed DeShazier, the principal, and I said, what if I bring in food? How would that be? So we ended up not doing my Pillow with Wings 10-week program. What we ended up doing was just the parent engagement program. And God came to me and said, it's called Connect, Nourish, and Grow. Connect the school, the family, the community, and nourish them with food and spirituality and Jesus, and they'll all grow together. And so that has been a real gift to me. We've been very blessed. I feel very honored to know that over a period of 20 years, actually, I can go back to when I was in high school to see how God was working through me and how each little thing was a step to where I am today. I think of Martin Luther King, who never had the opportunity to see what good came from the sacrifices that he made and the risks that he took. I get to look back over all these years and see that if I hadn't experienced the things that I did, I would never have walked through that door of education. I wouldn't have known how. I wouldn't have known how important it is to work with these parents, to help them to understand the feelings. So I was very naive as a grandmother raising two children. I was very ashamed. I was very embarrassed with my son being in jail and then ultimately in prison. So I really taught my grandchildren to hold it all inside and not to speak about it. And what I know now is the importance of having tools for teachers and having tools for children, that they can talk about the things that they're feeling and that they can express where they are. And now the really good news is that we've done pilots with St. Marcus, with Seton schools, with the Lumen schools. I just came back from a meeting with 14 of the Seton schools, and they are doing the entire Pillows with Wings program. And the Archdiocese has approved it for all 95 schools within the Milwaukee Archdiocese. We're working with the St. Marcus schools, all of the Lumen schools, and we have the Lutheran Christian Services, which are doing one-on-one with our book for students. And it's just, we have orphanage in Mexico, and we have 2 orphanages in Africa that want to do our program. And I could never have even guessed that this would be the journey that I am on, and that God would love me enough to trust me with this opportunity to touch so many people.
All right, Tommy, I'm taking over here. There'll be no addition. This is the end of part 1. I don't want to add anything to it. I'm not going to ask a question. I just want you to close it out. We'll do part 2 because I want everybody to hear this as it stands, other than just what website or where can people get information if they are curious about.
We just need to get into your calendar, Karen, and we'll do that, okay?
I think
Yeah.
the one
Because
thing,
after people see this, I want to address the millions of questions and comments they'll have and pass that along.
I think the one thing that I would like to just pass on is that, and I know, Homer, that you always talk about faith, and so often I've thought of faith as being, I stood on faith as feeling that it was having faith in God when things weren't working and sticking to it. But I think now my faith has encompassed the fact of listening and listening to God and hearing God's voice, and the idea of acting on what he's telling to do. So I have 7 grandchildren, and when they call me, I never say, "What is your name? Who are you? Which one are you?" I so intimately know their voices. That's how I feel about Jesus' voice right now. I so intimately know his voice. I don't ask anymore, did I make this up? Is it me? I know that he's speaking to me. And so I think it's listening and it's hearing. And if people want to know more about this, they can go to pillowswithwings.com and look at, we've got 2 great videos on there, and we talk a little bit about it. And um, it's a happy place, and it's a safe place for children and for parents and for school teachers. And I feel very blessed.
Hmm. Well, thank God for that pot, because so many people have been blessed through that in your faith. Karen Ellenbecker has been our guest on My Faith with Homer and Pip, and I'm with Homer. We all have a million questions. You will too, as you see this, and we can't wait to schedule again. You shoot us some dates, please, Karen, when it works out. And God bless you for listening to God and impacting so many people.
And
It's
we're all
amazing.
crackpots. Every
Yes,
one of us is
yes,
God's
we are.
crackpot, and he works through each and every one of us. Thank you
Yes, and
for having
the
me.
Lord is putting us together again, isn't he?
Sorry I talk so much.
Yeah. No, it was perfect. Homer's right. But we need a part 2. We'll go no further other than to say that My Faith in Homer and Pip was Homer's idea, inspired by the Holy Spirit. And the Lord has brought us such marvelous guests, such as Karen. And we hope and pray, everybody, that these faith shares will help you on your journey to and through the cross of Christ. We're all in it together by his love, his mercy, and his grace. So until next time, and soon with Karen Ellenbecker, for Homer, for Brent Young, our wonderful producer, and for Karen, I'm Tommy Pippins. Thanks, everyone. God bless you. We'll see you next time on My Faith with Homer and Pip.
Thank you. Do you want to do it again? Did I talk too much?
No, I don't want anything else in it. That is so strong. It needs to stand alone forever.
Oh
And
my
then the other
goodness.
stuff is because I would normally have said, look it, everybody watches that is going to say, God, would you talk to me like you talk to Karen? Come on,
Right.
come on. We'll hear that from thousands of people. But no, I want this to stand alone forever for people to be able to listen to it. That you had any concern about your ability to do this is insane, because you just told your life. That's all this is. So, yeah, no, we'll wait a little bit because I want to get this out and then give people a couple weeks, because they'll respond, and then we can go use that, because I really want to give people the chance to do that, because you of all that you've done, you now have what I call as a spiritual resume.
Wow.
Forever,
Wow. Thank
a
you so much.
100 years later. And because I was going to ask you too, if you talk to that lady, like,
I tried to
why
find
did
her.
she say that to you? And there's
Yeah.
there's so many parts of that, but it's not good enough to interrupt what we just heard. Tommy,
Thank
you
you. I
agree?
was so worried I wouldn't do a good job.
Oh,
Wait
but
till
you and the Holy Spirit, it was incredible. I do agree with Homer. He has the Spirit speaks to him in that regard. And there's so many questions. How's John doing? Was forgiveness part of your journey? We're broken, but God is healing us, and listening to him, and the prison ministry. It's just it's amazing, and how God has taken you and used you on levels that go far beyond even your incredibly successful business and radio show, you name it. So
yes, no one will know. This is amazing. No one's going to ever know you did finance.
mhm. That's right. When we get done with you, you'll be.
Well, you
That's
know what?
you're
I'll tell you that something that's really interesting that I look back. So I was asked to do, right before the pandemic, a TED Talk. And my first thing was, what would anybody I have to say that anybody could possibly want to know anything about? And I didn't want to do it. And but I met a woman that is actually a client of mine, and she said, I help people to do talks and to do TED Talks. I'll help you. But I had to go back, and it's the first time. So I'm talking about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 3 years ago now. I look back over my life and I realized the impact that God had on me. And I did my talk on positive disruption, and God came to me and said, it's positive disruption. It was like, what is that? but I was able to go back. And that was when I started to see how this all aligned. And I wanted to quit so many times. And I looked just recently, and I've had almost 450 people look at my TEDx talk, and almost 300, over 10% of people who have given me positive feedback. I could never, ever, ever have guessed that to be true, ever. It's just,
Yeah.
God just
Well,
did
the number's going to
everything
grow.
he did,
The number's going to grow.
and I didn't even know. And the thing about what happened in with Mary, who now I know it was the Holy Spirit, because now I really recognize the voice, is that it came inside of me and I believed it, even though I didn't think about it. Because I never worried about John being okay in the end. I never worried about Jeff. So it took all that anxiety off my plate, and I could just focus on the things that God was leading me to, even though I didn't even know I was being led. Crazy.
I don't, we can't talk anymore. You can't use all your good stuff off the air. Gotta save that for round
Should
two.
we shoot for maybe in about a
This
month, you
is,
think, lady and gentlemen? What do you think?
How about
yes,
after
yeah. Well,
October 20th?
yes. Once we once Brent gets it out and we can get some feedback from people,
Yeah.
there'll
End
be
of
a lot of
October or
Give
positive.
it 3 or
November,
4
the end of
weeks.
October or November, we'll just make it work.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
We'll figure it
sure.
out.
I love
Perfect.
you
Yeah,
guys.
we'll
We
do it.
love you too, sister
right.
in Christ. You're awesome. Keep
Thank you.
shining. We'll pray for you and all of
Yeah.
your loved ones and your ministry.
You can do something for me right now. You can pray for my granddaughter, Autumn.
Autumn.
She was on the streets for 8 years. You know, when
Mm.
children are exposed to drugs when they're born, there's a highly likelihood that they're going to pick up that habit.
Yep.
And so she's been on the streets for 8 years. She had a baby. Taylor's raising that baby right now, if you can believe that. But she just went into detox for Rogers, and now she's at Bethany in Oconomowoc, and she is doing fantastic.
Fabulous.
So say a prayer
Awesome.
that she continues on this journey with Jesus, and that she finds her way. And you know, I think she might have a story in her. Who knows someday?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Well, I
Keep
think
them coming.
I'm guessing her story will be part of your story B when we bring you back, Karen. All right, thanks.
Love you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
We'll finish the rosary up for Autumn today, Karen. Take care. God bless you.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right. Thank you, Brentley.